Okay, so I think today's topic, I think it's a very ambitious one, and I hope that we could do it justice because, quick disclaimer, and I'm sure you knew this coming in, when we say a primer on Jewish literature, there's a lot. When we talk about Jewish literature, and Torah literature specifically, we're not talking about War and Peace or the Communist Manifesto or anything like that. We're talking about Torah literature. And when we talk about something as vast as Torah literature, we're dealing with a ever-evolving, ever-developing wisdom that on any given day, there's 10 or 12 new books being published on this issue. What's remarkable, I think, or maybe one of the things that we want to gain appreciation throughout this class is that the Torah literature never stops. Constantly evolving, constantly developing. And even today, we're dealing with thousands of years into the project of unlocking the secrets of the Torah. There's more books being published on a yearly basis on this particular corner of scholarship than any other scholarship in the world. It means there's more books written about Torah than biology. There's more books written about Torah than anything, than history, any form of scholarship. There's more. There's probably more silly romantic novels written than Torah books. But in scholarship, in wisdom, in people dedicating their lives to study of deep, of a deep wisdom, there's more scholarship in Torah. And think about it. How many people are there studying Torah in the world comparatively? Like how many Jews? We're but 0.02% of the world's population. And how many of the Jews are dedicate their lives towards Torah study to the degree that they're able to write a book on it, on the matter? It's also very minute. Yet this group is producing more scholarship than any other group and any other wisdom. So that's, I think, one appreciation that I want to be able to get to. When we're going to scour the different books throughout the centuries, obviously starting with the book, the Torah, obviously, down to this day. And my goal is hopefully, we'll be able to gain a few things. Number one, like we said, an appreciation of the depth and the breadth of Jewish learning. We're going to see something remarkable about a wisdom that is thousands of years old, and is still vibrant today. And it's still incredibly studied and incredibly meaningful and impactful to people that they study. Think about this. Think how unprecedented it is that you have thousands upon thousands of people studying 10 hours a day, books that were written thousands of years ago. It's just remarkable. Think of the staying power. Nothing shares that. Nothing. Even people that study Shakespeare. How many people are studying Shakespeare in depth? And that's only a couple hundred years old, and it's finite. There's not how many books were written about it. No other corpus of wisdom is as dynamic, as influential, as impactful as the Torah. So that's one thing. Another thing I want to gain appreciation for. A basic outline, obviously, of Jewish books, and also, this is important, I'm going to try to focus specifically on the framework of what we call halacha. The word halacha is reference to law, but practical law. There's a lot of law that's not so practical because, for example, if you open up the Talmud, even open up Leviticus, and you start reading it, and you're like, this is not practical today. This is not practical today. You go through, and you'll find a very hard time finding something that you, living in Houston, as a man or a woman or a Kohen or an Israelite or anyone, could actually fulfill. So that's what we wouldn't necessarily call that halacha. But there are a lot of things that we can fulfill. And the process of taking the Torah and how it's developed and how it's organized into the epitome of scholarship, which is halacha, is very fascinating, I believe, and we'll try to demonstrate that as well. And lastly, I think this is the paramount reason why we're going to try to do this is when we think about what we're selling here. What are we talking about? When we say the word Torah, we mean God's instructions for us to fix humanity. So just think about the gravity of the claim. It's instruction from God himself, creator of heaven and earth and all the universes and all the cosmos, And it's given to us, to mortal man, to a finite man, to small-minded, narrow-minded man, as a tool to perfect themselves, as a tool to perfect humanity. Right. It's morality that's going to spread out and change the world, and we see, in fact, that it did. The Torah morality and the great system of law that the Torah outlined thousands upon thousands of years ago is still valid today and could still be applied today. And in fact, most of Western countries have laws that are modeled after the Torah in some capacity or other. But think about it, so that's the claim. If God is going to do something, God made our livers, pretty fantastic organs. I'm sure Bernie could give us a whole lecture on it. Or our brains, our brain. Like when God does something, He goes all out. Like like the brain. How many different connections are we dealing with in the brain? Trillions upon trillions upon trillions. Just so vast and so incredible and so organized. Everything's just perfect. Because when God does something, He does it all out. And in Judaism, we say that one of the ways we can connect to God is by analyzing what God does, and that could be in just observing the world and science. It could be just studying anatomy or studying the Torah, because you gain a similar appreciation when you plumb into the depths of the wisdom of what God does. You gain a certain measure of understanding into who God is. Hence, it's a point of connection, a point of interface that simple, narrow-minded man should have with the infinite God, creator of heaven and earth. So, God does the Torah. He's going to follow the same format. It's going to have the same complexity. It's going to have the same subtlety. It's going to have the same power of lasting ability as every other bit of God's creation, just with the same measure of perfection. So what we're going to try to uncover is that you have God here giving us wisdom with the intention of it maintaining its purity and its accuracy for forever, really. And how was that done? Like if man had organized this wisdom, men probably would have structured it differently, But because God did it, and God did it in a way that it has to be maintained, and maintained by who? By us mortal men. The Torah is given to us. The Torah is God's wisdom, hand delivered to humans. Today, hopefully, we'll discover how would God go about doing something. If you were God, so to speak, how would you have done it in a way that it would have been perpetuated in its accuracy for millennia? Probably different than the way it was. But when we work backwards and we see how it was delivered, we see how remarkable it is, and it's a testament to the fact that it has been maintained perfectly to this day. So that's what we're going to try to do. What do you guys say? Huh? Yeah. Okay, so the first book that we're going to analyze is the Torah, the Torah itself. And we talk about the Torah. Torah has a narrow and a broad meaning. When we're talking about the Torah, we're talking about the 5 books of Moses. Very first 5 books. Anyone knows the names? Everyone who knows the names of the books? Yeah. What's the names, Bernie? Very good. Genesis, Exodus, Vayikra, terrific. Numbers, Deuteronomy. So these 5 books are the most important books in the Jewish world, because these are the books given by the Almighty to Moses, written by Moses as evident in the book itself, written by Moses in the wilderness. The Jewish people leave Egypt. They go to Mount Sinai, right after they leave, just a month afterwards, they're at Mount Sinai. They're at Mount Sinai for an entire year. They have the whole Ten Commandments experience as recorded in Exodus chapter 20 and Deuteronomy 14 or something like that, 15, I don't know, somewhere there. They have that. Moses goes up to the mountain. He's there for 40 days. He comes back, and the Jewish people are sinning, or some segments of the Jewish people are sinning. With the golden calf, he goes up again, tries to intercede on their behalf. Eventually goes up a third time, comes back on Yom Kippur. And that's why Yom Kippur is a day designated for atonement, for forgiveness, because that's the day where God finally said he's going to forgive the nation. He gives Moses a second set of tablets to replace the ones that were broken. They settle down and start building a mishkan, a tabernacle, which is the core of what would eventually be the temple. And they're there for an additional half a year studying Torah. Right? What do they have to study with? Which books do they have? No one knows? Notebooks. That's right. They have no books to study. So what are they studying? They're studying what's called the oral Torah. Moses is about to die. Moses delivers 13 scrolls, written scrolls, to the people. Right? He delivers, why 13? Everyone knows why 13? One for each tribe. Each one of the 12 tribes of the people, they each got their own scroll, and one that was a central scroll. And these scrolls were part of every tribe maintained their scrolls for hundreds and even thousands of years. I don't know, we don't have them now. The oldest scrolls that we have today are the ones that we found in Qumran with the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's the oldest copies of the scrolls, about 2,000 years. But these scrolls, we have documentation of them being used and modeled or used as source material for all future Torah scrolls. So in essence, the Torah scrolls that we have today are copies of the ones written by Moses. Because as we know, a Torah scroll has to be copied from an additional Torah scroll. You cannot write a Torah scroll from a chumash. You cannot write it from memory. You cannot write it from writing on the internet. It has to be written from an extant Torah scroll. So Moses delivered 12 Torah scrolls, and those were the ones that were used to copy. And those were also referenced upon each other. All future copies, every couple of hundred years, they would get together and they would compare the Torah scrolls. You know, a Torah scroll contains 304,805 letters. So it's a lot of information. You know, and if you have a Torah scroll that's missing one letter, or it has an additional letter, or if one letter is cracked, or because it's written on cloth, it's written by hand with ink, and if you have, let's say, one letter that the dalet is cut off halfway, the entire Torah scroll is invalidated. And if you have an invalid Torah scroll, you have 30 days to fix it, or else you have to bury it. Now, because this book, remember, like we said, if God's going to do something, he's going to do it in a way that's going to have lasting value forever. And therefore, the Torah scrolls have to be copied from each other. The scribe has to pronounce the words before he writes them. And that was the method that was used, or some of the methods that was used to prevent mistakes from falling into the Bible. Now, let's stop here and talk about how this will work, because this will be very, very important. We talk about the Talmud and the Mishnah later on. We're going to have to hear about how exactly the oral Torah worked. Now, I know that the word oral Torah sounds problematic. There's a lot of problems, and we're going to try to address them. Like we're going to do, and feel free to interject with your questions, Bernie. I see you have them, or your skepticism. So, Moses is teaching. We're at Mount Sinai. Moses is teaching the people Torah. How does he go about doing that? How is he going to be transmitting the godly wisdom to the people? So it's going to start off like this. Moses is going to bring in Joshua. Moses is going to tell him orally, hence the word orally, he's going to tell him what he learned. Like there's a mitzvah, let's say, I don't know, don't break the bones of the Korban Pesach, of the Passover offering. There's a special offering that has to be roasted. Very a mitzvah that was done when every Passover night by the Seder, they would every Jewish family would go to Jerusalem. This happened for thousands of years. Every family would go to Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem they would bring their small little animal, a small little sheep. They would slaughter it.
Did the entire family go? Or
Yeah.
Just males.
Sometimes it was well. I think males that were obligated, but children and women were not obligated. But I think they went as well, like as evidence. Well, one of the it's a pilgrimage. It was
That's why they wouldn't have gone.
Why not?
Schlepping a bunch of kids. Have you ever done that?
Yeah, he has a bunch of kids.
And he's not the one that ships them from place to place.
You know, we were in Canada for a week and a half,
Don't throw me anywhere.
and yeah, we schlepped 4 kids there. I did the drive from Canada. I know what it is. You know, I had my daughter throw up me in the plane. You know, I've been there. We used to fly. We used to fly to Israel with like stopovers in like the Ukraine or Prague or like this exotic, because it was, you know, because it was cheaper than flying direct. And you pull out your hair and like try to gouge out your eyes and say, "I'm never doing this again." Yeah, but no, but you're right. There's no obligation, but you know, if they would want to participate, which. But we do have accountings. You know, most famously, the beginning of the book of Samuel, it talks about the pilgrimage everyone went up. And Bernie.
I'm trying to get straight. We talked about, you just talked about Passover with
The sacrifice, yes. Yeah, so there's a...
But we're just in Exodus. It's happening now, and you're talking about for thousands of years they've been doing this.
Well, that's
Since, not, during the 40 years that they were in the desert, they were doing that?
Of course. The first year after they left, they had a mitzvah of bringing the Korban Pesach.
Started then.
Exactly, and so that's my example I was bringing. Thank you for bringing it back here. So you have a mitzvah to bring an animal, you sacrifice it, you kill it. Right? You can only eat meat if it's dead. It's a sacrifice; it's dead. And then you roast it, and then you consume it. And everyone has a mitzvah for everyone to consume it. Now, that's one mitzvah. Another mitzvah is that you're not allowed to break the bones of the Korban Pesach, of the sacrifice. Another mitzvah is you're not allowed to take it outside of the place that you're eating. So you can't like grab like a leg and run out and start nibbling on it outside. These are separate mitzvahs. So Moses brings in Joshua and tells him there's a mitzvah to do the Korban Pesach, the Passover sacrifice. There's another mitzvah that you're not allowed to break the bones. There's another mitzvah that you have to consume it before midnight, and if you don't, you have to burn it the next morning. There's another mitzvah that you can't bring it out. Like that's what he did, and he gives him the mitzvahs, and he gives him the immutable principles and the applications of that mitzvah. Joshua sits to Moses' right, and then Aaron comes in and he does the entire process again. So Aaron hears it as well from Moses, and Joshua is still there, and he hears it again for the second time. Aaron's sons come in, and the elders of the people, the leaders of the people, the heads of the Sanhedrin, they would come in and they hear it again. So Joshua hears it 3 times. Aaron hears it twice. They hear it the first time. And then the entire assembly comes, and they do the massive presentation to everyone again. And then Joshua does the presentation. Everyone eventually hears it at least 4 times, and they study with each other. They memorize it. They memorize it. And this process of studying not just the written word, the written law, right, the 304,085 letters of the written law, but also understanding how to apply it, like what to actually do, with the principles and the applications, the interpretations, the understanding of fulfilling this written document, written instructions, was transmitted and memorized orally from rabbi to student, from parent to child, for 1,500 years.
Simple question. You mentioned the Sanhedrin. Did
Yes.
they have the Sanhedrin during the Exodus?
Moses forms the Sanhedrin in Numbers 11. Yes.
I
So
didn't realize that's when the Sanhedrin was formed. I thought it was formed much later.
well, it wasn't.
Only the Pharisees.
No. I'm saying it's I believe it's it's in the book of Numbers.
The great elders of the assembly, and I knew it eventually filtered to become the Sanhedrin, but I didn't realize that.
Yes, so Moses founded it. Moses founded it. I think it's in Numbers 11, 17, or something like that.
Tells him to get help.
Well, that's something
Is that
else.
when?
That's in
That's
Exodus.
something
No,
else?
that's something
Oh,
else.
okay.
That was I think a precursor to that. We'll see this a little bit
Yes,
further.
that's how it all begins.
Yes, in Exodus, Moses' father-in-law comes in, and he sees Moses standing day and night just adjudicating the people,
Right.
and he says, it doesn't make any sense. Why should the head honcho be doing all the petty matters?
Right.
Yeah.
So they assigned leaders of 10, leaders of 100, leaders of 1,000, leaders of 10,000, and only like the most difficult questions would actually filter up to Moses, and he would have some semblance of a life.
When was the
Well, the Pharisees is the term. The Pharisee, the term Pharisee was invented when, I don't know about the Christians. No, it's not necessarily by the Christians. Just Josephus writes that before the Christians, and it's also a term found in Jewish sources. But the Pharisees was a term invented to differentiate from the Sadducees. So Sadducees we talked about them already. They were a group of people that rejected the oral law and invented their own oral law. But then there were those. A Purusha means someone who abstains. Purusha means they abstain. So the term of the people that abstained from joining the rebellion were called, and were the regular Jews, were labeled as Purushim, as Pharisees.
Do we have a dichotomy right there? That because they rejected the oral law, who are they reject the oral law, or Sadducees?
Who were they?
I mean,
Why they do that?
Right. I mean, who do they think they are?
That's a question
No.
that exists even today.
No, but I'm saying. But if you remember, we did have a history class, and we talked about the period at the beginning of the Second Commonwealth, where the Sanhedrin, their role as central adjudicators of the people was diminished, and additionally, you have the end of the period of prophets. Also, you have a not divided people, but a nation where not everyone lives in Israel. The majority of Jews live in Babylon, and that brought about ability for dissent amongst the people, because you could now say, hey, there's no prophets, and the central authority is much more weakened, and it opened the door for people to reject some of the basic principles of Jewish law, like the oral Torah. So we have the Sadducees, you have the Baitusim, and this is something we see again and again. You have the 9th century, the Karaites, these, and even the early Christians were a group that made a departure from the mainstream normative Judaism, and it was a departure in the oral law. Like no one in his, I don't think anyone has until recently, until the higher Bible criticism movement of the late 19th century. You don't really have much dissent into the authenticity and legitimacy of the written Torah. It was all questioning the oral Torah. And that's a legitimate question. I think it's something that I want to address today. Like, hey, how do we know what's the evidence that it wasn't fabricated or whatever? That's a good question.
Well, isn't that, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but isn't that also kind of a root issue of the different branches of Judaism today?
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
I mean, like, even though we are Reformed, like I see that to some extent, like there are aspects of the Reform movement that are a rejection of the oral Torah.
Yeah,
And what
well,
does that make?
the original Reform movement was for sure that.
Yeah.
Today, I would argue that that today, like the Reform today, is not necessarily the
It's not what it
same.
used to
Yeah, it's
be.
not what it
Yeah.
used to be. Like, if someone truly rejects the oral Torah, then they would reject, let's say, the mitzvah of lighting Hanukkah
Completely
candles.
reject
Judaism.
yeah.
So the ancient Reform or the early Reform is very different than today's Reform. To me, even though I don't like talking about this topic, but to me, like today, the differences between the strands of Judaism is more in observance, I think, than ideology.
Yeah.
It used to be much more rooted in ideology. Like if you read about like the doctrine of early Reform, like if you look at the Pittsburgh Platform of 1885, you could Google it. And it was a convention basically that tried to crystallize what is Reform Judaism believes. This is a long time ago. This is 130 years ago, whatever. And you read this today, and you ask a Reform rabbi today if they agree with that. All Reform rabbis would disagree with it, every single one, because it says we don't believe in having a home in Palestine and all ritualistic law, and like it was a wholesale abandonment of. But today, you look at the updated Reform kind of doctrines or whatever, or description of tenets, and it's about Torah, it's about tradition, it's about mitzvahs, and it's about observance. I'm saying, okay, so what's the difference? It's just a difference in levels of practice, I think.
And then in reality, reform, I think, just ends up being a catch-all. Because like a lot of, like us here, like it's the only Jewish option. And so, different levels of practice are in this, catch-all congregation. So,
Yeah, but I'm saying that's true. But what's clear is that the kind of discussions that we have today, we learn about all traditional Jewish sources and Jewish philosophy, and like that was not possible in the Reform in the 19th century. That was not, like if you walked into a Reform synagogue, even 50 or 70 years ago with a kippah, you would be ostracized.
yeah.
Like that's what it used to be, which is ridiculous. Like it's a shul, like.
Well, I was married by a famous Reform rabbi who he knew that I went to one of the conservative synagogue, but he said he would not wear a yarmulke at the wedding. His name Bertram Korn. I don't know if you heard of him. He was an admiral. He's buried in Arlington Cemetery, and he was a Civil War historian. He wrote a lot of books.
But he refused to wear a kippah.
Yeah, but it wasn't a big, thing about it. But he made a point saying when he met with us before the wedding,
That's I'm saying it's. I think that the divisions between different groups of Judaism are dissolving, and I think it's a good thing because if you look at the classical Jewish sources, you find. You don't find you find obviously dissent, and of course, but the idea of labeling different Jews as that's a new thing. Like this is this kind of Jews and that kind of Jews. I feel like hey, we're a family. We have a shared history. We have a lot to be proud of together. We have a universal vision. We could be Jews. We could just be Jews, and we don't have to deliberately try to make as many schisms and internal fights.
And I guess recognizing that different levels of observance are not necessarily outright rejection of oral Torah, just a different way of looking at it, or being in a different place in life at a given time. It's refreshing. And I have a question. A question going way back to Exodus.
Yeah.
Okay, so the establishment of the Sanhedrin coming from Moses. You've got the situation where Jethro comes in and tells Moses to get help, and then they set up kind of decision-making leaders on each level based on population groups. And then there's also an instance where at some point God causes a number of people aside from Moses to prophesy, and like some of them are at Mount Sinai, and then some of them are back in the camps, and there's a debate. Are those not the same instances, or
we have many instances of
confused
not
in
many,
my
but
head.
we have some that's the cases of the renegade prophets,
was it that? No, there was a point where
and they were prophesying that
gathered.
Moses is going to die and Joshua will take us in the land of Israel. They kind of went awry. There's rules about prophecy, what the prophet's allowed to do, what prophets allowed not to do, how exactly prophecy works, and how do you become a prophet. There's what's the outline, how do you do it, what's the qualifications, and
Maybe I'm misremembering, but aren't those the people that are chosen as leaders, like the initial elders? There's a group of
I believe the
imagining this?
verse
I'm completely
in
misremembering this
in Numbers talks about the shotrim, the police officers or the taskmasters of the Jews in Egypt, the ones that were in charge of smaller groups of Jews. They were the ones who were chosen to be the Sanhedrin.
Okay.
Because they were the ones who had self-sacrifice, and they were the ones who would take the blows in favor of protecting their people, and hence they are the ones who are worthy of leadership.
Okay.
But the group is around from the time of Moses until basically the 2nd century. And if you actually look at the history of Sanhedrin, you have basically the history of the development of the oral Torah. Because at the time that Sanhedrin is its strongest, we find no accounts of any disagreements. If you look at the 700-800 years from the times of Moses till, let's say, the times of Hillel, so maybe even 900 years, we don't find any accounts of any disagreements. We find conflict. We find maybe theoretical or political disagreements. We find divisions amongst the people, but we don't find any halachic, any Torah-based disagreements until you have the period where the Sanhedrin becomes weaker, where you have Gentile forces interfering with how the Sanhedrin operates. Their position becomes weakened, and that, together with the disappearance of the prophecy, opens up the door for internal disagreement, because prophecy and Sanhedrin are methods to ensure that if mistakes or disagreements do arise, then they're mediated. So this is Deuteronomy 17, very, very important verse. It says, if there's a disagreement between a law and a different law, between a blood and a different blood, you should bring it up to the Sanhedrin, and you should present your arguments, and then you should do as they instruct you, and don't deviate from the way they instruct you, right or left. In Rashi, that tells you, even if they tell you that right is left and left is right, don't depart from their instruction. So that when the Sanhedrin has that power as granted to them by the Torah, right, there's no room for any debate. Because if there is a debate, if there is a disagreement in any law or any application of any law, all you do is follow the ways of mediating it by bringing it to the Sanhedrin, and they would vote or they would mediate, because that was the epicenter of the oral Torah transmission. They become weaker, right? We have openings for debate. You have periods where the Sanhedrin was temporarily disbanded for 10, 12 years. So you have generations that had room for doubt, and that could fester into potentially what could be construed as two Judaisms. You have the Sanhedrin being totally disbanded, and that coincides with the writing of the oral Torah in the form of the Mishnah. Because once you lose this preventative measure of ensuring that mistakes do not perpetuate, then they in fact will perpetuate. And your only option is to write it down, because otherwise, if it's just maintained in its oral form and you don't have the same stability to ensure that that's done properly, and you don't have the preventative measures to ensure that if a mistake should arise, that it will be mediated, then you're toast. Because within 100, 200, 300 years, you'll have variant or divergent Judaisms, and then we could just close up shop, just shutter the doors on humanity. So that's why the Mishnah had to have been written. So when we talk about the first book that we're going to analyze, the written Torah, it's very important to know that it is not a final book. If you just read the Torah, if you were to just discover the book, find out this is the Word of God, and open it and start reading, you wouldn't know how to practice. Like the Torah says, you should not do melacha on Shabbat. Don't do melacha, don't do work. It doesn't give you any description of what's considered work, what's not considered work. Am I allowed to pull my couch from one end to the other room? Is that considered work? It's all arbitrary. And remember, if God does something, if God's going to give us instruction, it's not going to be up to our own personal interpretation, because then everyone could do as they want, and it can never be judged, and never be ruled, anything like that. 4 times in the Torah it says you should wear totafot between your eyes and on your arm. Nowhere does it say what totafot is and what it looks like, how it's made, and how you wear it. Nothing. Yet, if we look at the tefillin that was found in this past century, in the caves in Masada of the soldiers of Bar Kokhba, and we compare them to the tefillin that we have today, they're identical. 4 boxes or 4 compartments in the tefillin of the head, containing 4 scrolls. 1 compartment on the one of the arm containing 1 scroll. Which particular parts of the Torah? Identical. Right? The order of the of what where to put what to put in which slot, identical. Remarkably, what's clear is that the methods of implementing the law was uniform across the people. That can only be if there was a companion corpus of information to tell you how to do that. Now, this is, I think this is maybe perhaps will make this whole idea more understandable. Oh, there's another great story here. This is a great story. There's a story Talmud tells about Hillel and converts. So we have the one with this, standing on one leg. Everyone knows that story. But there's another story where the convert comes to Hillel and says, "Hey, I want to convert to Judaism, but I only want to convert and accept the written Torah. That's it. The written Torah. It's clear. It's solid. There's evidence. It's been around for thousands of years. It's transmitted perfectly. This is the unadulterated word of God. Oral Torah. The rabbi is there. Yeah, who knows? The telephone game. I don't want to deal with that." So what does Hillel say to him? Okay, sure. So he converts him. And then after the guy comes, "Hey, listen, I'm totally ignorant. Why don't you teach me Torah?" So the new convert comes, and Hillel sits him down and teaches him, okay, fine. They open up Genesis. They start reading, and he says, well, what are these? He doesn't know Hebrew either. So he says, well, this is a bet, and this makes the bet sound, and this is a resh, and this makes the R sound, and the aleph. And he teaches them how to read, and teaches them the first verse of the Torah. And he says, okay, fine, after an hour, come back tomorrow. And the guy comes back tomorrow, and he says, okay, let's review what we did yesterday. But this time Hillel switches the letters and says the Beis makes a Lamed sound and the Resh makes a Gimel sound. He switches the letters. And the guy's like scratching his head. Wait a minute. Yesterday you told me that this was the letters and this is the orders and this is the sounds they make, and now you're changing it. So Hillel tells him, you see, if you don't rely on your teachers, you don't even know how to read. Like, how do you know what sound a bet makes? How do you know? Only because you heard it, right? Exactly. So if you don't trust the people that are instructing you, right, you're not going to be able to study anything. Right? Even understanding what the marks of Hebrew make, what sounds they make, that alone requires an oral component as well. But the question is, why would God do it like this? Doesn't it make sense? Just write it all down. You have an index, what to do with all the law. Obviously, it'll be a lot, because once they actually did write it down, it came out to 63 books. And that's just the Mishnah. And then you have the Sifra Sifri, Torah's Tonim, Mechilta, Toseftas. There's just such voluminous content here. But write it all down. Wouldn't that, God could do it, right? God can figure it out. Right? God can make our brains and our liver and our heart and make the world, be, right at the sweet spot of human habitation, If God can make vegetation grow out of the ground, out of soil, God can figure out how to do it. Just write it all down. Once you write it all down, and it's simple. Isn't that a better solution? We don't have to have this whole argument, and we don't have to have the whole skepticism of is it true, is it not? And there was this one conservative rabbi who took 30 of his congregants, and they played the telephone game, the broken telephone game. And he was trying to use this to prove that the written Torah couldn't possibly have been transmitted accurately. So he takes 30 and he gives a secret message to one of them, and then the guy transmits the other one. They do 30 because 30 is the right amount of times. We talk about from Moses till Rabbi Judah the Prince, it's only 30 generations. So you think about it, 1,500, it's 30 generations. So it's 30 handoffs from one generation to another generation. We're not dealing with thousands of generations. Since Moses' time, we're about 110 generations. It's very minimal. It's not so much. It's not that many handoffs. So, but this guy said, "We'll take 30," and they did it, and it was a totally scrambled message. And evidence, proof that this couldn't have been transmitted accurately. Then there was a different guy who said, "You know what? I'm going to take 30 kids and give them a message, and let's see if they can transmit it." But he did a catch. He said, if we do it correctly, if I tell the first guy the message, and he has to pass it on, and the last guy has to announce it out loud. If it's accurate, everyone gets $50. Take a bunch of 8-year-old kids. Everyone gets $50. Every single one of you 30. And for an 8-year-old, $50 is a lot of money. And voila, what happened? It was perfect, So it was perfect. And his argument was, hey, we have to realize that the gravity of the seriousness and the importance that the Jewish communities ascribed to maintaining the accuracy of the transmission was so important, they valued it so much that they took such care to make sure that it was transmitted accurately, and then that could be transmitted accurately. But just write it down. Just write it down. Isn't that a simpler way to do things? So why does it have to be oral? The answer is like this. When God does something, He does it perfectly. If God's given us a Torah, He's going to give it to us in a way that's going to maximize our ability to maintain it and teach it in its most pure form forever. There are many, many benefits of oral instruction. If anyone here went to university, right, I could ask the same question of you. Right? Bernie, you became a doctor. How many years did you spend studying in school? And
Too many.
Too many, right? Just give me the book, yay big, let me read it. Why do I ever have to see any patients? Why do I have to ever actually be there hands-on and hear instructions and hear lectures from other why?
But they're doing that now, everything online and,
Yeah, even online,
Video
it's even video. It's just, but then no one gets the book. Why? Because nothing compares to oral instruction. Nothing. For a few reasons. First of all, when someone has an oral instruction, right, what are they teaching? They're teaching a principle. Principle masked or covered or shrouded in example. Like if I'm going to teach you a principle about the laws of maintaining, safeguarding my property that it doesn't damage your property. So what am I going to do? I'm going to say, if I was doing that today, I would say, I cannot have, my Wi-Fi router or something like that, or like my bandwidth on my phone or something like that interfere with your signal. Like that's probably the example I would have given. You open up the Talmud and it gives examples. There's so many books written about my animal who gores your animal. Now, I don't know, maybe you guys have like pets or like dogs or cats or something like that, but probably none of us have an ox. And we don't plow fields. Probably. I don't know. I can't. Is anyone here that has an ox, pet ox?
Not currently, but my grandparents did have a
You're okay, fine.
I grew up around animals.
Yes. Okay. So we have an example.
I'm sorry. I'm such a weirdo.
That's fine. No, that's fine.
But yeah, we did. We had cows and goats and dogs and chickens.
That's cool.
And pigs. My grandfather had pigs. He
That's-
wasn't Jewish.
So for us, with the exception of your grandfather, the best example for us to be given about guarding your life, it might be your car, it might be your home, it might be your permit, it could be anything like that. It wouldn't be cows and oxen goring each other. But because the oral Torah had to be written down by necessity, therefore the principles had to be presented in the form of examples that were contemporary. So 2,000 years ago, everyone was basically farmers, and that's what they owned. Property was livestock. Therefore, the way to present the immutable principle was with an example that is time dated, so to speak. So the benefit of having oral instruction is that it's very fluid. It can be updated, and with the examples could change every generation. As the development of technology progresses, you take the principle, the core principle remains unchanged, the application and presentation of that principle is updated for whatever is contemporary. You use the lingo and the vernacular, the lexicon of the people that you're talking to, and you update the principle. You maintain the principle, but you update it with the application that is contemporary. That's a benefit that you only get with oral, like as in our example, like if in medical school they have lots of new techniques and lots of new drugs, and they have these Da Vinci little surgeon guys, right? They update it, and the people today, if you were to give them Bernie's education, they would be somewhat at a disadvantage when it comes to practicing medicine today. Is that right? Benefit number 2: when I teach something orally, there's the benefit of vocal inflection. I may have given this example before. It's my favorite example.
I did not hit my.
I did this example with everyone here. I won't do it again. But clearly, if I say something, I could use a lot of vocal tools and even visual gyrations to make my point, to present my point across in a much better fashion. Like, if I tell you, I just use this example because you guys all remember it, so it worked. If I say you the words, 6 words, ready? I did not hit my wife. What does it mean? What does it mean?
You didn't hit her.
That's right. Okay. I'm going to say the same words. You tell me what it means. I didn't hit my wife. What does that mean? I didn't hit my wife.
No one else did. You
Well,
did.
someone else did, right?
Someone else did.
If I say I didn't hit my wife, what does that mean? I might have kicked her, I might have punched her, I might have, abused her or whatever, something like that. I didn't hit her. Might have employed some other form of abuse, right? If I didn't hit my wife, I might have hit someone else's wife. Like, this is an example one of my friends gave it and told me I really like it. That because I didn't spend time to update it. But that's an example where oral instruction works much better. And we all know this intuitively. It's much better to go to school and hear from an instructor. It just works better. It's a better form of instruction. When you go to school, additionally, you develop relationships with teachers and with fellow students. There's a dynamic community effect that's very positive. The Almighty wanted us, our students, to have a relationship with the previous generation. There's this link, right? When you have a relationship with a student, with a teacher who had a relationship with a teacher who had a relationship with a teacher, going back to Moses, there's a special flavor that cannot be captured if it was just everyone studying by themselves with a book. And lastly, fourth reason given why oral instruction is the preferred method of transmitting our Torah is because when it's oral, it doesn't get in the hand of Gentiles. And not to say that we belittle Gentiles or anything like that. Point being is that the Torah is for the Jews. And the day that the Torah was translated into Greek, the Septuagint, is a day of mourning because once the Torah got into non-Jewish hands, we were constantly, I had to go on these apology tours of trying to explain, and they didn't have the insight, they didn't have the background, and then you have people like Julius Wellhausen who analyzes the book, the Torah book, as he would any other book, doesn't have the instructions of how to actually use the book, and we'll get to that in a second. And therefore, he develops an entire philosophy that claims that the book was forged or was fabricated or there's multiple instructions because he doesn't have the tools. Doesn't understand. You don't know how to use the book. You don't know how to read the language. You studied Hebrew in your 20s. How exactly? Right? And that is a liability for us. So, and opening up the oral Torah as well. Many Jews were persecuted for things that the Talmud said because the Gentiles got their hands in it and they don't understand what it means. They don't understand they don't study the entire Talmud. How many Gentiles study the entire? How many Jews study the entire Talmud? So they don't have that same perspective, and it's a very negative thing. So, and additionally, for these reasons, the oral Torah, there's a law prohibiting the transcribing or the codifying of the oral Torah for these reasons. Now, so what do we have? We have a written book. We have the oral methods of how to actually use it, how to interpret it, the understanding of the laws, all the practical applications of the laws. We have evidence in the book itself that refer to the companion instruction. Many times in the Torah says place in the ears or seem a place in their mouth, like it references to other forms of instruction. Place in the ears of Joshua, as I instructed you, even though the Torah itself doesn't say. Many times the Torah itself testifies to the written Torah itself to the other existing instruction. Now, we're going to take the question and flip it on its head. Rabbi, if the oral form of instruction is so vastly superior to write anything down, why do we need the written Torah? Ta-da! Question of the day. Psst. That's a good question. Just have it all maintained in oral form. Why would you need to write things down?
Because the problem of being misinterpreted.
Why would it be misinterpreted?
Going down the
Because
line.
rabbis are human.
And they got their foibles. They got their thing, well, it probably should be done this way. This sounds better this way.
So what you're saying is correct.
It would change.
When you study by a rabbi, right? It's 500 years before the Common Era, and the Jewish people are living with autonomy and sovereignty over Israel, and they have the Sanhedrin. Everything's fine and dandy. You study by the rabbi, and he tells you, "I heard this from my teacher, heard it from his teacher," all the way dating back to Moses. You could ask a question, right? If their oral tradition does not comply with the written book, right, then it has to be discarded. Hence, the two elements of the Torah feed off each other. The oral Torah can all be derived from the written Torah once you know the rules of deducing from the written Torah. And the written Torah is the framework for the oral Torah. So in essence, when we ask the question of how do we know what we know about Judaism, there's two answers. There's number one, tradition, and number two, deduction from the written Torah. If you open up the Talmud, it's all flipped on its head here. There's a little bit of a subtle point here. You open up the Talmud, and it says, an eye for an eye. An eye for an eye. An eye for an eye. So what does that mean? If someone pops at your eye, what do you do? You poke, right? You poke there? That's what it says in the Torah. You don't like that, huh? And that's Torah law, right? 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 Wrong. Thank you. Wrong. You open up the Talmud in Tractate Baba Kama, and it says, an eye for an eye, this means money. This means money.
Civil justice, value of an eye for value of an eye.
Exactly. And the Talmud says, wait a minute. It says an eye for an eye. The written book contradicts your tradition. When the written book contradicts your tradition has to be discarded. Unless you use the principles of deduction of the written tradition to explain or to support, to bolster your oral tradition. So it'll say like this. It will deduce using the 13 or 32 principles of biblical deduction to prove from the Bible itself that an eye for an eye means money. Now you'll say, okay, fine. So if you read the Talmud, you'll say, hey, how do we know that an eye for an eye means money? We took the written document. We took the methods of instruction. Right? And we'll get to that in a second. This is also another cool, critical point. The methods of deduction. And we deduced from proofs within the book itself that it must be money. But in essence, that's the opposite. In essence, it was a tradition. Eye for an eye means money. There was a challenge from the written book, and then it was substantiated from the principles of deduction of the written book to prove that it indeed means money.
So many proponents of capital punishment in modern day, let's say, you can say it goes back to Bible eye for an eye. Meaning that say misinterpret or don't know what to say.
Well, that's an example of the problem of having the written book in the hands of the people that don't know how to use it. So I'm going to read you. Let me read. This is a very brief description of the 13, what they call the 13 principles of elucidation or deduction. Number one, ready, guys? Through a conclusion inferred from a lenient law to a strict law, and vice versa. Right? If a lenient law has a certain element to the law, then most certainly a strict law has that as well. It's called Kal V'chomer. Right? If a leniency has a stringency, then certainly a stringency has a stringency as well. Does that make sense? Okay. Number two, through tradition that similar words in different contents are meant to clarify each other. Many, many, many hundreds of times in the Talmud would say, hey, this word over here matches the same, in Genesis, matches the same word in Deuteronomy. And in Deuteronomy it means X or refers to X. Therefore, in Genesis it means X as well. And vice versa. Hence, similar words are bridges to transfer laws. For someone to claim, by the way, to actually claim that this was all just fabricated by man, it's so incredibly complex that you have an enormous amount of information, and all of it is just coded with each other and sending back information back and forth. I'll give you guys an example of this. In Deuteronomy, it says, when a man shall marry a woman, and he doesn't like her, and he finds that she committed adultery, and he divorces her. That's what it says. The word it says for marriage is ki yikach ish isha. Yikach means to take. From this word, yikach, from the word that was used to describe the process of marriage, the Talmud deduces from all the way back in Genesis, that's the same word that was describing the transaction when Abraham bought the cave from Ephron to bury Sarah. It says, Hasadeh asher lakach Avraham, the same word, and there it meant with money. That's how we know that marriage in Judaism can happen with presentation of a ring. When a presentation of the ring, as all Jewish marriages today happen, there's a presentation of the ring that clicks the marriage. Right? Similar words, and they teach you laws. Even though one's talking about marriage, and one's talking about a transaction that happened with Abraham and Ephron 3,800 years ago, but because the Torah used the same words, it teaches you that there's a connection between the two. If that was done with money, that can be done with money or monetary value as well.
Did Hamburg get his,
Hammurabi?
Hammurabi,
I was wondering.
did he get his information from the Torah? What did he do? Misinterpretation or something?
That's a good question.
I was going to ask you, what was the time frame for the Code of Hammurabi?
I think when people compare the Hammurabi Code to the Torah, Hammurabi Code was this great king Hammurabi, which, by the way, very, very cool insight.
Hammurabi was
It's-
like 1750 or so.
Something
I
around
don't
the
remember
time.
that.
Yes,
13 something was Moses. Was that?
yes.
Okay.
So the word Hammurabi, the word Ham. Where's the word Ham? Where's that come in the Torah? Ham.
Well, I was going to say,
Who was
one
Ham?
of the
Japheth,
tribes?
son of Noah.
No, sons of Noah. That's right.
Noah, right.
That's right. That's right. And in all likelihood, this Hammurabi was one of the was a descendant of Ham, who lived right about that time, and therefore when the precursor to the written Torah, or to the Torah, the Moses' Torah, as studied by Abraham, Abraham had Torah even beforehand. There was some sort of from Adam to Noah, there was some sort of tradition. The Hammurabi Code shares a lot of elements with the Torah because it shares it shares a commonality with that family that had, like Noah had Torah in a kind of like a what's the word I'm looking for? Not rough or
draft,
not a rough draft. If this word I'm looking for, I apologize. A primitive form of Torah. So yes, when it shares common elements, that's probably that. But now, Code of Hammurabi is this code that they found, and they were able to interpret it, is like a list of laws, of 282 laws written on this big block of. I think they have it like the British Museum, because the British pilfered everything that they came across. It's amazing, like how, the Jews get
How
beef.
could you be so terrible?
That's well, I would have done the same probably. I don't know. This is priceless. We're the British Empire. Like we control the world. Think about it. British imperialism. Yeah, that's what they did. That's the British. We think of them as these nice people who just drink tea. So they found this and they interpreted but to compare it to the Torah, it's a gross mispresentation of the exhaustive nature of the Torah, the complexity of the Torah, the scope of the Torah is much grander, and plus the tradition of the Torah as well. But yes, it does share. Like I think they found an eye for an eye there as well. They did. Yeah. They share the precursor to the Torah as the knowledge that Noah had and Adam had and Abraham had. Probably this Hammurabi, this descendant of Ham, had as well, and he formulated some sort of doctrine out of that.
Is all of this where the rabbis got the notion that if you are kind when you should be cruel, the day will come when you are cruel when you should be kind? Is that an element to what we're talking about here?
Well, that's I believe that's in is that a Talmud or a Medrash that says that if someone has mercy on the cruel, then eventually they'll be cruel to.
When they should be kind.
Yeah, and like the example is given is like when Saul had mercy on Amalek, and eventually he, slaughtered towns of completely innocent people. An example of someone having misguided, when someone like tries to be more holy than God wants them to be, tries to overthink the situation. But I don't know, what's the relevance to that
Is
here?
that misguided forgiveness?
Maybe, perhaps. We have a very low tolerance for evil. Like that's the core of our nation. That's Moses exemplified that. Like we don't accept it. Like when something's evil and something's wrong, the Jewish response is to vanquish that. When someone tries to be, the Talmud says that when someone tries to be all nice to the murderers, it's not a good thing, and it eventually will result in the innocent getting slaughtered. But Jennifer? What's the relevance to that to this?
Well, you're talking about the need for both, for the oral law and the written law, and my guess was there needs to be not just a rabbi's idea of what is and is not appropriate in a specific situation. It leads too much to influence from the local culture to a weak rabbi.
Okay, so that could potentially happen. No one's going to deny
Right,
that could
having
happen.
the written as well as the oral
But when you
is a better plan than just having an oral.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to prove now is that each one on their own essentially could teach you the same thing, because once you have these tools and understand how to read the written Torah, you could actually deduce all the oral laws as well from it. So I'd read you two of them, but I'll just quickly go through the rest of them. A general principle derived from one verse and a general principle derived from two verses. A general statement limited by specification. Like if you have a general principle, then a specification, or a general principle, then a specification, and then another general principle. Okay, I don't want to get into this details. Point being is that, remarkably, we could take the written Torah and extrapolate from that the oral Torah. Thus, the written Torah itself functions as an assurance for the oral tradition to be true. All of this was written down once this ideal form of transmission became impossible. Right? We talked about the Hadrianic persecutions. If we're living in a world where we could have, for 20 years, we could have a Judaism where studying Torah publicly is punishable and pain of death. Of practicing any form of Jewish law is punishable and pain of death. If the rabbis were prohibited from assigning new rabbis, like smicha was banned. Once that exists, and the central authority is disbanded, and the temple is no longer in existence, the Jewish people are spread out throughout the world. If it's not written down, it will be forgotten. It will be forgotten. But what's very critical when we talk about the Mishnah and the Talmud, when it was written down with a minimal encroachment on the principle. If you look at the Mishnah, right, the 63 books of the Mishnah, you'll find that it's written very tersely, very, very succinctly, very shortly, and it's just laws. What they decided to do was not to fully write down the oral Torah, everything, rather just the core laws, because once you do that, you still maintain the oral flavor, and you still necessitate the oral instruction to a degree. So once you have just the core law, well, the sources for the law you don't have, the extrapolations, the exceptions, the analysis, everything else must be maintained in its oral form until that was eventually written in the Talmud. Thus, when we have a Talmud today, it's comprised half of Mishnah, half of Talmud. It's probably like 4% Mishnah and 96% Talmud, because the Mishnah is very, very short, and the Talmud just expands and expands and expands on that very short law. Like an example would be, if you have a custodian, if I come to someone and say, hey, watch this item for me. You have a custodian, watch this item for me. And that item gets stolen. So, I come to Vitaly and say, hey, watch my phone for me for, I'm going on vacation. Keep an eye on it. And someone breaks into this house and steals it. Do you have to pay me or not? So, well, you have the option to either pay me if you want, or you could swear that it was stolen from you and that you weren't negligent, and you'll get off the hook. That's what it says in the Mishnah. That would be an example in the Mishnah. But the Talmud would say, well, what if someone pledges to pay, but doesn't actually pay? Or what happens if the thief is apprehended and then they have to pay a penalty payment? Who does that go to? Very much the expanding of the core law is going to be done in the Talmud. Okay, so I feel like we dedicated a lot towards. I didn't really get to everything I wanted to get to, of course. We also have 20.
We got 30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay. We have 19 other books that comprise the Bible. Anyone wants to list all 24 books of the Bible? Anyone wants to make an attempt to see how far we could get? So
Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd.
Well, no, it's all because of one.
Oh, well, grew up Christian. I've got it memorized that way.
Okay, so the 5 books of the
Kings,
Torah,
Samuel,
Lamentations,
2nd Samuel,
Joshua, let's do them in order. Joshua,
Okay.
Judges,
Different order.
Samuel,
One,
King.
Samuel
Well,
two.
Samuel 1, that's a Christian invention.
Yeah.
Samuel 1, Samuel 2, but it's still Samuel.
Kings,
Kings, Jeremiah,
there's Chronicles,
Isaiah, Ezekiel,
Jeremiah, Ezekiel,
12
Lamentations,
the 12.
Daniel.
So that's 13.
Amos,
That's one of the 12.
Micah,
One of the 12.
the Kilometer.
Oh, you're not going to let us split them up?
Oh, you can split them up.
Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos,
Proverbs.
Nahum, Habakkuk. I'm going to mispronounce these.
It's a good job.
And Malachi.
Malachi.
And,
It's
I'm gonna
okay.
mispronounce
That's
it all.
okay.
Yeah. And then
Okay, so we have 24 books. What is the function of these books? We don't get any mitzvahs from any of the books. The function of these other books is supplementary because it, A, gives us a perspective in history, B, it gives us a heavy, heavy dose of musar, right? Of castigation, so to speak. It gives descriptions of the misdeeds of previous generations as instructions for us when we read it. Right? We will learn also to not make the same mistakes as they did. We have Psalms, the compendium of Psalms, which is
Song of Songs, we forgot that one.
Song of Songs, Ruth, Esther, Lamentations, right? Ecclesiastes, nice.
And the Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
Now Job and Jonah, they're in.
Job, right? The Job is another example of according to Jewish tradition, Job is actually written by Moses.
Yeah, Job's one of the oldest books, isn't it?
According to tradition, I think there's disagreements even within Jewish tradition exactly who wrote it, but the one opinion says it was Moses. The Psalms is primarily written by King David, but
Contributed to.
no, well, Psalms 150 chapters, so some of them says is written by David, like some of them written by the sons of Korah, some of them written by Moses. Tefillah Moshe Israel came Psalms 90, right? A prayer to Moses, it's written by Moses. Some of them written by I think there's 10 different authors to Psalms itself. The function of should we go through all of them quickly in order? Genesis? Okay. I was like, oh, just Google it. Okay, sorry.
We did get most of all of them.
We did a good job. We did a good
There's
job.
a song.
The function of this is to give us the history, to give us also the instruction of the misdeeds and the failings of previous generations, and that will help us not follow their path and stay in the straight and narrow. You read the great castigations of Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and many of these things you read them, and today they careen true as well, because the direction of the flow of humanity doesn't really change. The temptations and the mistakes and the various ways that humans and Jews have gone awry, they take different forms, but they share commonalities. And we could read those today, and we could still find insight. We could still find spiritual guidance and direction, and moral instruction that is as valuable to us today. But we don't actually derive laws from them. If you look at the Talmud, let's fast forward to the Talmud here. The Talmud and the Mishnah. So these were canonized, so to speak, or codified as being the last word of oral instruction. And if we were to actually study the Talmud from beginning to end, memorize them, have deep insight and guidance of actually how to use them, have all the things that the people of those times had, we would able to come to the ultimate goal of it all, and that's halacha. What would we do? We would take all of Talmud, analyze it all as one, take all the millions of words in Talmud and all, and everything collectively, and be able to deduce from that law. The problem is that it's so vast and so voluminous and so dense, like one page, if you really study it and you just analyze it, you could spend months on one page. I myself, guilty as charged. I have spent many years studying 2 or 3 pages of Talmud. Not the sharpest guy in the world, but
Sounds like the accountable.
At the same time?
yeah.
Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act, right? Well, the same, but most of other wisdoms that we encounter are horizontal. Like Affordable Care, we're talking about 27,000 pages, right? It's a lot of information, but
2,700.
sometimes 700. Okay, once it's 2,700, who cares, right? No, ironically, the Talmud is also 2,711 pages. But there's vertical study as well. It's all even the Talmud itself is written in a way that there's so much vast wisdom to uncover that you could literally spend years studying 1 or 2 pages, literally years, and not just on the weekends. There were yeshivas in Israel where they over 6 months. The entire yeshiva would study 1 or 2 pages. 1 or 2 pages. What does a page of Talmud look like? What a Talmud here for? This is what it looks like. How many words is that? You have the Talmud here in the middle, commentary of Rashi on the side, commentary of Tosfot. Study the page. Move on to the next page. The point is that they stress the vertical study, and the vertical study is really infinite. You can keep on going, because there's just so much there, so much to uncover. And theoretically, that is possible. There was the great Chazon Ish, the great rabbi who lived in Israel, died in 1953. He famously said, "What does it mean to be a Torah scholar? What's the definition of a Torah scholar? A Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar. What's the definition?" So he said, he gave a great definition. He says, a Torah scholar is someone who could study 40 pages of Talmud in 1 day, and could also study 1 page of Talmud over 40 days, and study 18 hours a day. That's a Torah. Vertical and horizontal study. We could do both of them. In yeshivas today, usually the morning section, the morning 4-hour block is dedicated towards the vertical study, and the afternoon is to the horizontal study. So you would study, let's say, a page in the afternoon, but much quicker, or even half a page. And in the morning you would study a half a page a month or a week, with a vertical study.
So vertical meaning that you just go and
Deeper.
all the different sources which refer to this place, look at them, and then those sources lead to other sources.
And analyze it. And
Bifurcation, which is endless, right?
yes.
Yeah, I heard somebody describe Talmud study once as you should view it as the ocean, and you can choose whether you're going to try to just surf on top of it, and and that would basically be just see what it says and figure out generally what's going on, or if you've got time to scuba dive.
Yeah. And you just keep it plumb to that.
Yeah.
And that's actually, the Bible itself says,
Yeah.
Arucham eretz midur chav miyam. It's as broad and as the ocean, and as deep as the ocean. So that's a good characterization. Now, what's the?
No, I would just, if I had to be doing that, I'd be pulling my hair out in 5 minutes.
Well, why is that?
So fast.
But it's
I couldn't-
it's so fascinating.
Yeah,
And
but I can't dwell on something that long.
so, but
My
yeah,
personal
And yet you
opinion.
were a brain surgeon?
No, not a surgeon. I just a thinker. I never
Oh,
did
just a
anything.
thinker.
He was a
Neurologist.
surgeon.
Neurologist.
Yeah, the brains of it.
now the Talmud was finished, and there was a problem because you have all the information is there, but how are you going to access it? How is the average Joe going to know what to do with the Talmud? It's all there, but you kind of have to know everything. It's not necessarily written everything in the same place. You have different sections of the Talmud. Talmud go on meander in different directions and start talking about other things, and you'll have an issue of Talmud or an idea of Jewish law that's split up into 18 different places in the Talmud. So the great Torah scholar has to know all the places that this idea is mentioned, to know each one individually, to understand how they relate to each other. Like, it's very complex. So after the writing of the Talmud, we developed a new kind of literature called responsa literature, where when someone would write a question to the scholar, and the scholar would respond, and that would be publicized. We have, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of responsa books written till to this day.
Like a dear rabbi, right?
Like what is it?
Dear Abby.
Dear Abby. Well, now I brought here an example of this. This is from the 18th century, the Noda Yehuda. This is this great rabbi who lived in the 18th century. He was 6'8", huge. This huge man who wrote these. I've studied some of this. I have a very close affinity. He was the rabbi of the city of Prague, and he wrote many. Like you see, like these tiny letters. Like we ask these questions. And there was this one particular. I had made a. Yeah, I made a note of it here. There was this one particular question that he got, and this is the question. But it's a very long and very bizarre and like eye-popping story of this woman who committed adultery with like 10 people in the community, like gory details, like, and you're like, whoa, like you kind of think like we think that the misdeeds of today's generation are like we discovered something, as if it's a new thing.
50 Shades of Grey.
I'm thinking if
This, I mean, like the description, in such gory detail, and you're like, whoa, like you, and
Is
the
it
question.
only the
Just trying
details
to be
about the
salacious.
female?
Yeah.
Is that the issue?
No, it's a whole story. It's the whole story.
Yeah. Is it all about the female?
No, it's about
It's
the.
about the 10 men too, because I just wanted to be clear. I
Yeah,
wanna
like, does
understand.
everybody get in
You're going to
trouble?
start studying this stuff now.
So that's the question is, it's a very complex story, and the question is, we know that a woman who commits adultery is her husband has to divorce her. So the question is, does the husband have to divorce her? Is he obligated to divorce her? So he writes this 30-page, literally 30 pages, like tiny letters, responds to this question. And he starts off, and I don't know anyone who's actually read this because it's so vast, it's so enormous. It's just one of the questions that he has here, but it's one that I had encountered. I'm like, whoa, I think I kept this,
I saw you dog-eared that page.
Yeah. So he starts off by saying there's 6 reasons why this woman should be permitted to marry, and all of them from every corner of the Talmud, and not only corners of the Talmud, corners of all the of all the commentaries, like just. And this is before computers. Like this is like memorization of thousands of books, and not just memorization of the themes, but on the nuance and the subtleties. Like it's just incredible the scholarship that we have in just one of these many hundreds of books.
And he didn't have clerks? He didn't
No, nobody. And he writes, he says, I can think of 6 reasons from every corner of the Talmud why, and then he says, but each one of them I'll disprove. So he starts off by saying, okay, let's disprove the first reason. And it spends like 5 pages, like analyzing incredible scholarship. I think if anyone actually reads this beginning to end, like if we were to do a study of this, it would take us probably 5 years to finish just one response, because it's all based upon, you have to know so many things before you even read what he says in itself. And if we were actually just, okay, from now on we're just studying this responsa, because it's so super interesting, it'll probably take us 5 years to finish it. And maybe then, and
So,
just
yeah,
just
sum it
cranked
up
it
for
out.
us. Did he say to divorce her, yes or or no?
He said yes,
Yeah.
but
He just asked me
Because
the
I'm not
telephone
waiting
number.
5 years to find out the answer.
Yeah.
no, but you read it and you're like, this is just incredible,
Yeah,
incredible
it's like a
scholarship.
Supreme Court opinion.
Right.
Oh,
Basically, it's like
this
it's,
blows Supreme Court
Yeah.
opinions out of the
no,
sky.
But
that's the
the
kind of thing.
process
Yeah.
and the thinking and the
you
reasoning
don't-
behind it are the same. It's
She's
more
not
of a
flogged to death, not stoned to death.
No. This is in the 18th century. There's no the Jewish criminal courts have been discontinued for 1800 years.
It's on the divorce or not divorce.
Yeah. So
Right.
but he has first he presents 6 potential reasons why it should be allowed, and then he spends 30 pages to dismantling reason number 1,
Opposing
reason number
arguments.
2, reason
Yeah.
number 3, reason number 4.
Yeah.
Like this is just one. And
well,
this,
yeah, because basically, obviously, you have to divorce her. Like, there's no doubt about what she did, but there's no value in giving a short answer. The value in addressing opposing arguments is that he knows that for his community, this is going to stand as a facet of the entire body of law. And so whatever, in addressing these arguments and then in drawing his ultimate conclusions, he's giving guidelines of reasoning that other people behind him can use in facing similar situations.
That's right.
It's like
That's right. So this
and
will be
not just
invoked in
addressing
further.
just that one woman. It's here's an additional body of
That's
principles
right.
that you should think about when dealing with these sort of situations. These are the stringencies, these are the leniencies, and this is where we can compromise and where we can't. And
That's right.
I mean, that's why you would do it that way.
Right, but that's true. But
Yeah.
compared to the Supreme Court decisions is not
Oh,
fair
I'm
because
not-
it's
I'm
so
not
much
saying
more
they're-
vast.
Yeah,
Like
but
for
the
every
reasoning,
word
right.
of Supreme Court
Yeah.
decisions that we have, we probably have 500 books. You know, it's
Yeah,
just
I mean,
it's just,
I'm
it's
not
just
saying
astonishingly different,
equal
and the
weight.
complexity and
Yeah.
anyhow.
In Jewish tradition, is it somewhat similar to what common law is? Like, if there is one opinion, one response cannot be applied in a different continent, in a similar circumstance.
Yeah, it's Jewish law.
80
Yeah.
years
It's
later.
Jewish law, of course.
It's like
And
you're a member of two nations. You have two
Of
bodies
course,
of law.
of course,
Yeah.
of course. And it's very infrequent we find actually a conflict. There's no conflict. It's Jewish law. Almost never is there conflict. So that's the kind of the thing that's going to explode after the Talmud is written. Because, as we said, for the average guy, the Talmud has it all, but it's unusable because what are you going to do? Like, you're going to study all of Talmud, you're going to dedicate now 70, 80 years of your life, and then you're going to answer the question you need now?
You're just going to study it.
Well, I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Or what do you practice as you're studying it?
Yeah.
Beginning in the 10th century of the Common Era, we have an era called a group of 500 years basically of scholarship called the Rishonim. And the Rishonim are going to do so much to making the Talmud more accessible. They're going to write commentaries, and there's going to be so many books written, and there's going to be such an explosion of scholarship that's going to change the Jewish world. Example that we talked about, Maimonides. Maimonides outlines in his introduction, he says, I am going to organize all of Jewish law, all of Jewish practice, all of Jewish philosophy in one book, which is really 14 books, but wherein you won't need the Talmud, because I'll synthesize all the Talmud, and it will be the end of all this whole response, and none of that. You just go to the book, and it's all organized on topic, and it's all broken down to perfection. You don't need anything else. And while he succeeded, he also failed. He succeeded because this became one of the pivotal books of what we have today in Jewish law, like synthesizing the Talmud, organizing it. But additionally, when he seeked to end all books, and in fact is the most his book, the commentary, the book of the Rambam is the book that is there are more books written about it than any other book. I mentioned this when we talked about Maimonides and back in the classroom that there's 300 books a year published annually on this book of Maimonides. An incredible explosion of scholarship. We have stories of heroism amongst these people, like the authors of the Tosfot. Tosfot are on the margins of every Talmud, so every Talmudic page you'll have. In the middle, you'll have Rashi, also from that time period, commentary on the Talmud, analysis from different parts of the Talmud. and the Tosafot on the outer margins also.
I have a dumb beginner question.
Yes.
Tosafot, that's a group of people?
That's a group of people. Yes.
Okay, and so
Yes,
it'll be different bits of commentary
That's
from
right.
different rabbis who
It's
existed
French,
at the same time?
French and German schools, primarily comprised of Rashi's grandchildren
Okay.
and his disciples.
Okay.
And what's it called?
Tosafot. Tosafot means additions.
You said heroism. What's heroism?
Oh, so this was a time the medieval ages were, very very harrowing time for many Jewish communities. We have the Inquisition, we have the Crusades. And Crusades is like hundreds of years of total turmoil and total, like, you're at the mercy. Like thousands of little Jewish towns were slaughtered. So you have these, we have documentation of certain parts of the Talmud that were written in caves. These great scholars are in caves, and they're all alone, and they're hiding from the authorities, and they're writing down their books, but they don't have any ink. So we have these stories of them actually cutting themselves and writing with blood. Like, we know there's certain parts of the Tosafot, we know this was all written in blood. We know it. It's in the book of Shabbat. Like, that's what I mean by heroism. There was such an explosion of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of commentaries written on the Talmud in that time, and many of them under very, very challenging circumstances. So we have some in commentary form, some like the Rambam, which is not written on the Talmud but organized anew. You have the example of the Rambam. You have the Tur also wrote all of Jewish law in a way similar to Maimonides. Maimonides organized them in conceptual order. Tur organized them in order of the day. So, like, for Maimonides, the first thing that he writes is, hey, you got to believe in God, and the laws of faith, and the laws of study of Torah, like, starting from most important to least important. You have the Tur, who does kind of the same, tries to do the same thing, even though he is a little bit more expressive and more expansive, and incorporating more opinions by name. But he's going to start off by saying, hey, what's the laws of the morning? You wake up in the morning, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
And like the laws of like washing your hands in the morning.
Orderly functioning.
And the laws of then the morning prayers, and eventually finishing all the morning prayers and afternoon prayers, and laws of eating eating breakfast, and the laws of saying the blessings before the meal and after the meal, and different things within the meal. Like, that's the order that he did. You have a third way of doing it, which is organized by the order of the Talmud. So like the Rif, Rabbi Alfasi, very, very instrumental figure in the development of the oral Torah, of writing it, of the expansion. He's going to write it in the order of the Talmud, as will the Rush. You have this book called the Chinuch, one of 3 volumes. The Chinuch organized. He didn't really organize Jewish law, but this is a great starter book. If someone wants to know what we think about Judaism, like just Judaism, it's one of the best starter books, because what he does is he counts 613 mitzvahs, organized as how they appear in the Bible. So the first one would be fruitful and multiply. That shows up right at the beginning of Genesis. That's mitzvah number 1. And he will tell you in the mitzvah just the basic outline of the mitzvah, and then the rationale for the mitzvah, right? The reasonings for the mitzvah. Just a few details about the mitzvah, and then moves on to the next mitzvah, which would be circumcision. That's mitzvah number 2. That shows up also in Genesis, and then just from Genesis to Deuteronomy, all 613, where you find them in the Torah, and a little bit about them. I think to me this is a very good place. I want to know what we mean when we say Judaism. Like here, I picked out here, Mitzvah 16. He tells us not to break a bone, so I mentioned it earlier, not to break a bone in the Korban Pesach. And I'll say what's the reason behind it. To remember the miracles of Egypt, of the Exodus from Egypt.
Is all of this transcribed into English?
Yeah, the chinuch they did in English. Very, 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 very good. But I would advise everyone to get it and read it. It's not so hard. It's not going to take you years, and it gives you very clear insight. But and he tells you why do we have this mitzvah, like the rationale behind it. And he says, don't think that there's so many mitzvahs to remember. And he goes on like here. If we had more time, I would tell you. I would just go through this. Very interesting what he says here.
So he's just one guy, though.
Yeah.
The Chinuch is like.
Chinuch. Yeah, one man,
So
one
he's
book.
One man. Okay.
He's a great scholar. We have other books written by him.
Yeah, I
But-
don't question him. I just want to
How
understand.
was Maimonides' works preserved when the Jews actually during the Inquisition, or around that time, had them burned. They gave
Yeah. So, the Inquisition that's 200 years after Maimonides is already dead, and Maimonides' works gained tremendous fame even within his lifetime. So it was widely, but we do have many books that are gone to time. For example, Maimonides' son, Rabbi Abraham, the son of Maimonides, who suffered the unfortunate fate of being the son of the great person, who's the son of another great person, but who lives his entire life in the shadow of his father. So he wrote a book sourcing all of Maimonides. Like when we spoke about Maimonides, we said that one of the problems with Maimonides is that there's no sources. So he wrote that book, but we don't have it. We have references to it, but we don't have the actual book because everything has been transcribed by hand, and it's very obviously arduous and tedious process, and we don't have it.
But the Jews, the group of Jews, they gave those books to be burned.
I don't know if they gave it to me. We know that many times the Talmud was burned. And
No, but the Jews themselves felt that it was something to do, and then they were. Where did I read that? It must be in
Not all of them.
Talushkin or something.
Yeah, it's not all of them. I mean, at that point, like, there are ships going to other countries, there are Jewish communities in other places.
yeah,
I mean, like, just because we have record of this one community destroying all of their books, there are other copies of it elsewhere. And then, stuff gets hidden away
Well,
and
remember, in
found
those
later.
days, this was before the printing press, so everything was, all those copies were written by
printing
hand.
press. That's another good example. What was the second book printed in the printing press?
I don't know,
The second book
What-
after the Bible? Wasn't the Bible the
After
first?
Gutenberg Bible
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, the Bible was the first
was the Bet Yosef. It's one of the critical books that we wanted to get to.
What-
I don't have so much time, so I want to just quickly outline some more books here. Like I picked off my bookshelf. This is a book written by the rabbi of Krakow in Poland. He lived in the 17th century, so 16th, I think, and he was my great grandfather. So I have the book. It's called Megala Amukros, which means the revealer of the depths, and it's 252 different interpretations of one verse in Deuteronomy, and he died at the age of 49, and he died in the middle of writing it. Like, and this is a demonstration. Like, this is a contemporary book, 252, and like every one of them is really long. Like, he say, hey, look, this is method number 201. He explains it in 202, 203. Like, it's an incredible amount of depth that we can have in the Torah.
You can do it about almost any paragraph in Deuteronomy or anywhere else. Right?
That's right. And then you have, this is a book written in the 1990s. This is one of four on the laws of Shabbat. And this takes the laws of Shabbat and says, okay, we have laws of Shabbat, but what about air conditioners and refrigerators and,
Stainless steel.
what do you do with all of these things, And this is my grandfather's book. Which, there's so much more to say. Let's stop here. Yes, question.
Well, so, I have a question, or I have a suggestion, but I'm scared to mention it. I'm gonna say, one of these days, can we take one chapter out of the Torah and dissect it in here?
Let's do it.
Yeah, like an analysis.
Hey, since Rabbi Dan's not here, Rabbi Wolbe is talking to the kids,
Oh,
so he's needed. Do y'all want to stick around? And
yeah. Well, and honestly, like, if we wanted to do something like that, like analyze